events, meetups, and even trivia nights. You'll get real support, feedback, and connections that matter. Don't quit your show or your dream. Come find your people at podground.io. That's podground.io. Hey everyone, welcome back to I Made a Podcast. This is the show where I help you to start, grow, and monetize your podcast without the guesswork. My name is Creary, and I am glad that you are here today. And this is one of the episodes that I've been looking forward to record for a long time. Today, we are walking through the Podcast Readiness Assessment. And this is something that I built specifically to help aspiring podcasters to get an honest picture of where they stand before they hit the record button. This is not just a feel-good quiz. This is a structured, weighted scoring system that looks at 7 key areas of your podcast journey, and it tells you one of 4 things. It will either say to launch now, refine before you launch, build your foundation, or it will say do not start yet. And that last one, don't get nervous about it, because every single person that has ever launched a successful podcaster was sitting at one of these 4 places. Now, this assessment is not here to discourage you. It's here to show you where to invest your energy so that when you do launch your podcast, you are launching something that can actually grow. And in this episode, I'm going to walk through every single question on the assessment, and I'm going to share with you why it matters and how it factors into your overall readiness score. And by the end of this episode, you will understand not just your score, but what that score is actually telling you about your podcast's chances for success. All right, so let's get into section number 1. So the first category in the assessment is vision and purpose, and it carries a 20% total of your score. And that is the highest weight, tied with 2 other categories. And this should tell you something. Clarity of purpose is not soft, nice to have quality. It is foundational. You need to have clarity of purpose. So let's go over to the podcast assessment on my computer screen, and I'll show you the questions that this part of the assessment covers. All right, so when we get to the podcast assessment, you click on this button that says Start Assessment, and here it is, Vision and Purpose. The first question says, how clearly can you describe your podcast purpose in 1 sentence? And it's very simple. You just need to click on the buttons that apply to you. So there is, I haven't thought about it yet. I have a vague idea. I can explain it, but it's broad. I have a clear, focused purpose, or crystal clear. I can pitch it in 10 seconds, all right? So wherever you are with your podcast, if you have a clear version, however you answer this question, you just need to go onto the assessment and you can click it in here like this. And at the end of this episode, I'm going to show you the results from all of these things that I click here on the assessment. So you will do it together on this in this episode. So the next question is, do you know who your ideal listener is? Now, this is very important because when you know who your ideal listener is, you are able to target your content. You'll be able to have a laser-like focus and focus on the problems that the person that you are speaking to is having. All right, so you can have no idea, general sense, I know the demographics, I have a detailed listener persona, and I have researched and validated my audience. So let's say, for example, let's just say a general sense, okay? Move on to the next question. It says, what makes your podcast different from others in your niche? Now, this is how you stand out from everyone else, because there's nothing new under the sun. The podcast that you're starting, guarantee you there's someone else out there who has the same type of podcast. But what's important is your vision. How does your podcast stand out from others in the same area? Now, it could be just your unique perspective. And let's go to the questions here, or the answers in the multiple choice for this question. It says, I haven't researched any competitors. I'm not sure. I have some differentiators in mind. I have a clear and unique angle. I have a tested unique value proposition. Let's say, for example, I have done some research on the topic that I'm doing, and I have a clear and tested unique value proposition. I'm going to click that. All right. Now this section of the assessment is over. You move on to the second part of the assessment, which is the content readiness. Now this category of the podcast readiness assessment is weighted at 15%. Now, this is where you find out whether you actually have a show that you can make and move forward and make impact, or if you just have enthusiasm or a nice idea about having a podcast. So let's get into these questions on this topic in this section, and I'll show you how it breaks down. So first of all, the first question is, how many episode ideas do you currently have? You might have none, you might have 1 to 3, 4 to 10, maybe you have 10 to 25 ideas off the top of your head. Now, here's a pro tip for everyone out there who maybe has a business. If you have a website with FAQs, potentially every single one of those FAQs can be its own episode that you could release as a podcast. So if you have maybe 20 FAQs on your website for your business, you have 20 episodes right there. So that's a pro tip for someone out there who's thinking they don't have anything to start a podcast on. So let's get back to this. So let's say if you have 25 plus ideas with outlines, all right? So you have bullet point outlines at the very minimum of not only 25 topics, but bullet talking points for each episode. All right, so let's say you have 25 plus ideas. Now, the next question is, do you have a format in mind? So is it a solo? Is it an interview base? Is it a panel, or is it a narrative, or is it documentary style podcast? You have to answer this question to figure out the type of format that you have in mind. And again, we're talking about content structure here for your podcast. So if you have it nailed down, you've chosen a format, but you haven't tested it with pilot episodes or anything like that, let's just say you've chosen the format. We'll click that right there. Now, the next question is, have you outlined or scripted any episodes? Now, again, this is very important. And what I like to do, or how I coach people, is, you remember when you were in high school and your English teacher said to write an outline for an essay? You had the title, the intro, and you had a 3-paragraph essay. So you had one topic for the first paragraph and the bullet points to support that topic, and the same thing for the second paragraph and the third paragraph and the conclusion. That's how I like to coach my podcasters who come to me for coaching on how to create an outline for their podcast. So when we look at this questions that says, have you outlined or scripted any episodes? At the very minimum, you have to look at to see if you have any an outline with bullet points, like a 3-point paragraph or 3-paragraph outline that they taught you in high school. All right. So say, for example, let's say I have 3 to 5 dedicated outlines already ready and good to go. All right. And now let's go to the next section. All right. So let's go on to section number 3 of the assessment. This is the consistency and commitment section, and it's tied for the heaviest weight in the entire assessment at 20%. And it also contains one of the most punishing penalties in the scoring system, because your commitment is very important if you plan to have a successful podcast. And if you score 1 or 0 on the scheduling question, meaning you have no plan or you will just publish when you feel like it, the assessment automatically deducts 10 points from your final score. Why? Because inconsistency is the number one reason podcasts die. Not bad audio quality, not too small of an audience, but inconsistency. So this is very important. Listeners need to be able to rely on you. The algorithm rewards consistency when you publish, and your own creative momentum depends on a schedule. There is no workaround for this, all right? So let's get to these questions on my computer screen right now that speak to your consistency and your commitment for your podcast. So the first question is, do you have a publishing schedule planned? All right, so say, for example, if you plan to publish your podcast once a week, the answer for this question is yes, I have a schedule and content batched ahead, right? So this is something that if you've gone above and beyond, where you not only have a schedule, but you've already recorded and batched those episodes, you can click this button here. Or if you let's just say you have a set schedule, okay, you go there. Next question is, how many hours per week can you dedicate to your podcast? Let's say you're an all-star and you have 10 plus hours a week to dedicate to your podcast. We'll click 10. Next question is, can you commit to at least 6 months of consistent podcasting? And again, this is the big question, right? Because Most people, the term is called pod fade. They start their podcast, and then when all of the work gets too much, their podcast just fades away, right? You want to make sure that you can commit to at least 6 months of podcasting if you plan for your podcast to be successful. All right, so let's say this. Absolutely, I have blocked the time and resources. So let's say that, because I'm serious about podcasting. So let's say that I click that on this assessment. Let's go to the next section. All right, so section number 4 is audience and growth. So this section has 20% of your total weight. And again, there are penalties that are included in this part of the assessment as well if you answer one of the lower ends of the assessment. Now, this is because you can make an incredible show and still completely fail if no one knows that it exists. So your audience growth and your promotion is extremely important. All right, so let's get to the questions on the assessment right now. Do you have an existing audience, whether social media, an email list, or community? It's totally up to you. You can start a podcast with no audience at all, but it just leads to more of the execution and the strategy that you're going to have to do to build that audience, right? But let's just say you have between 5 and 2,000 followers across all social media platforms, all right? Now, do you have a plan to grow your listener base? You could say, no plan, I'll figure it out later, or maybe you have some idea. You could also say that you have a documented growth strategy, or you have a multi-channel growth plan with milestones, right? So this is getting really tactical. This is saying you have a strategy, platforms that you're going to reach on, how you're going to reach the people in those platforms, and you have markers around your goals to know when you hit those milestones, all right? So let's say I have a multi-channel platform, a multi-channel growth plan with milestones, all right? All right, so the next section is the promotion section. Now, you guys must have heard me say this before if you listen to any episodes of the podcast. If you don't toot your own horn, there's no music. So you have to be bold and confident in sharing your message and promoting it out there. Allow people to be sick of seeing you if they're not your ideal listeners or your ideal viewers. But the people who are your ideal viewers, every time you share something, because you know it's for them, they'll be appreciative of it and they'll subscribe and they'll follow and they'll like everything that you share. But you have to be able to promote it. All right, so let's get to these questions regarding your promotion strategy. All right, so the first question is, do you plan to create short form content, either clips or reels from your various episodes? So yeah, if you have no plan to do that, you could say no. You could do it eventually. Yes, occasionally. Yes, 1 to 2 clips. Yes, 3 to 5 clips per episode. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to go on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and share reels. It seems like so much extra work. But those platforms, and also let me throw in YouTube Shorts in there as well. Those platforms are really good to take your highlights from your podcast and share it so people can get a taste. It's really good for people finding out about your podcast, that they will link back to your social profiles and eventually listen to your entire episode. So that's why this is very important. So let's say, for example, that I plan to do 3 to 5 clips across all platforms for every episode. Now, which platforms will you use to promote your podcasts? So if you plan none, you could say none. But say, for example, you want to share your short form content on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram, and Facebook. And it's really easy. There are some tools that you can actually sign up for where you can connect all of your content to and then schedule it. I believe Opus Clips does that. And you can have your short form clips, schedule it, and then upload it and schedule it, and then it sends it to all of those platforms, and you only need to do it once. So that's something that you can utilize if you think that this might be a burden for you. So let's click multi-platform with paid promotion and collaborations, right? So if you have some extra pocket money, you can put it in and promote some of your highlights of your podcast across these platforms. And if you interview people, you can collaborate them and leverage their audience. All right, that's the key thing that we need to remember about interview-based podcasts. You can leverage the person that you're speaking to, their audience. All right, so do you have a launch strategy for your first episodes? I usually, now the questions is there's no strategy. I'll publish and hope for the best. A lot of people do that. And I'll tell my friends and family I have a pre-launch and a launch day plan. Let's click that, right? Because not everybody has a full launch campaign with trailers and teasers and partnerships. But let's say that you have a pre-launch and a launch day plan, meaning like say, for example, you have an email list that you've been teasing them that you're going to start a podcast soon. And on day one, when your podcast launched, you have multiple episodes for them to listen to. You have clips that go out on social media so that people can know that you just started your podcast. It's a strategy to get attention, and you send out emails. You put, they don't call it Twitter anymore. What's it called? X. And you share it on social media. You tell all your friends and families, and you ask them to listen. You ask them to comment, put a review, and you ask them to share with their circle of influence. This is what I've just shared with you is an entire strategy for launching your podcast. You do all of these things, and you can have a really good, successful launch for your podcast. All right. So let's say I have a pre-launch and launch day plan. All right. But we're not going to click off this one here that says full launch campaign with trailers, teasers, and partnerships. Some people do who have businesses. They can probably create some trailers, some teasers, and have partnerships with other people. But not a lot of podcasters have all of this in place. So let's just say I have a pre-launch plan and a launch day plan. So let's go to the next section. All right. Execution and resources. All right. Now this is where things get really practical. So this is 10% of your total score. Now this might seem low, but do not let that fool you. This category reveals whether you can actually produce a show or whether the logistical barriers will stop you before you even find your voice. All right. So let's get into the questions that are in this part of the assessment. If you have recording equipment or setup, right? So say some people just have a cell phone, which is fine. You can do it with just your cell phone. But some people invest in a basic USB mic and they use their current laptop. Some people have a good mic, like one of these ones, headphones, and a quiet room that they can record that's acoustically treated. Or they even go to a podcast studio and they record there, which has everything, the lights, the camera, the microphone, the quiet acoustically treated room, everything is there. So let's say, for example, you are going to do your podcast in a room like that. So let's click professional setup with acoustic treatment. Now, do you know how to edit or have someone who can edit? Now, there's a lot of people who can edit your podcast, including me. If you want, you can reach out to me and I can help you do that. Not for free, of course, it's business, right? But there are a lot of people that you can find either on Fiverr, or you can actually learn how to do it yourself. There's a lot of tools out there that are user-friendly. There is a learning curve, but after you do it for a while, you can get the hang of it. But if you don't have the time to edit yourself, you can hire someone on Fiverr, or one of the other platforms, or you can reach out to me and we'll work out something where I can edit your podcast for you. But let's say that you have professional editing skills or a dedicated editor, and we'll click that. Now, this is the next question. Do you have podcast artwork and branding ready? Now, there are many questions here, so if you haven't thought about it, you should think about it. You might have some rough ideas. You might have a name but no artwork. Now you might have a name, artwork concept, and color scheme, or you may have had someone do a professional branding package and given it to you and everything is ready to go. Let's click that one, right? Because I like the way that sounds. You should have everything ready and good to go for your podcast if you're at this stage. All right. But if you don't, you'll see how the assessment will score you at the end. All right. So the last section is your long-term vision. Now this carries about 5% of your score, but do not dismiss it. These questions are about whether you're building something or just wasting your time. All right. So this is very important if you have a long-term vision for your podcast. So here are the questions. It says, do you have a plan to monetize your podcast? Right? Maybe you haven't thought about it. It would be nice, but it's not a priority. Yes, eventually through sponsorships. Maybe let's say, yes, I have a monetization plan. Now, one of the things that people do not think about is how they will get anything back from their podcast. They think just maybe by selling t-shirts and merch that you actually break even. You have to expose your podcast to so many people just to sell one t-shirt. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's possible, but it will take for your podcast to reach hundreds of thousands, maybe even 500,000 downloads for you to start to see any significant revenue through merch. So it's better to have a more thought out monetization plan if you plan on monetizing your podcast somewhere down the road. All right, whether you have a business or product or service that you can sell that's related to your podcast, that's a great idea where you don't even need a lot of downloads to start generating revenue through your podcast. All right, so let's say you have multiple revenue streams mapped out through your podcast idea. Now, where do you see your podcast in 2 years? A lot of people don't even think about this. Have you didn't even think about it? You might have clicked this one, or maybe you're just doing it as a hobby, which is fine. But maybe you want to be known as a recognized voice in your niche. All right, so let's click that button and say in 2 years, this is where I plan to be. And we'll go to the next section, which is the final readiness section. Now, this takes everything and puts it together, all right? So here are the questions. On a scale of readiness, how prepared do you feel? All right, so after we've gone over all this, you've done some work on your own, how ready do you feel? Maybe you feel completely confident and ready to go. Let's click that. And maybe you feel slightly prepared, but you still feel nervous about it, right? You might be able to click that. But let's say that, let's go in the middle and say that you are well prepared. And the next question here is, what is your biggest concern about starting a podcast? Right? So we've gone through all this. Now, if you've listened to any episodes of I Made a Podcast, this question is answered by listening to my podcast, because I talk to podcasters and we talk about all of the tips and tricks to help you get better and overcome any objections that may come from this question. So if you have any concerns, listen to I Made a Podcast, go listen to the past episodes, and the concerns more than likely will be answered in past episodes. So if you are a subscriber of I Made a Podcast and you've listened to past episodes, this question should be, I'm not concerned, I have a plan. I should have put in there because I watch or because I listen to I Made a Podcast. But let's put that, I have a plan. All right. And that's pretty much it. Now, how does the score work? Now that we walked through every question, let me quickly explain how the score adds up to the final score. Each question is worth up to 4 points, and those points are added up within each category and converted to a percentage. Then each category percentage is multiplied by its weight, and those weights combine into your overall readiness number out of 100. Okay? Penalties are then subtracted. Remember, I mentioned penalties before for certain things like consistency, right? So if you have no consistency plan, you minus 10 points. No promotion strategy across all 3 of those questions, you minus 15 points as an example. Or no existent audience growth plan, that's minus 20 points. These are not arbitrary deductions. They reflect a specific failure pattern that ends podcasts before they even start. And that's the reason why I put those penalties in there, because those are key things that you need to be, those are non-negotiables. You need to have those in place if you plan for your podcast to succeed. Now, your final score maps to a grade and a verdict. So 80 and above means that you launch right now. You can do it. 65 to 79 means that you should refine some parts of your podcast before you launch. 45 to 64 means that you need to continue to build your foundation before you move forward. And below 45 means that you shouldn't start just yet. And one of the things that I always do, because I wasn't just going to leave you hanging like that, one of the things that I do is I put recommendations on this assessment. All right, so the recommendations are a direct reflection of how you answered the questions. So if you answered any of the questions where you failed, or maybe there were big penalties attached to your score, the recommendations will highlight the points of your questionnaire where you maybe were penalized for answering something that took a lot of points away from your overall score. But based on your specific areas where your strengths are and where it shows you where there are gaps, and it gives you recommendations so that you know exactly what to do going forward so that your podcast can be successful. So let's click see results right now on this assessment and we'll see what it says for our podcast. Cut that out. All right, here we go. So based on all of the questions that I entered in, it says that your podcast readiness score is 86%. It's a ready builder. So it says launch now. All right. It gives you a category breakdown. So across your vision, your content, your consistency, promotion, execution, audience, and then long-term vision, it shows you where you are out of 0 to 100%. All right. So some categories I got 100% for my execution. My audience score was 75, right? Now I can't remember exactly what I put down right now at this point, but I'll show you something in a second. Now, if I continue to scroll down, it shows me my top strengths. It shows your execution and resources is 100% and your consistency to commitment is 92%. It says areas to improve, your vision and purpose, which is 75%, and my audience growth strategy is the areas that I need to improve based on how I answered this assessment. All right. Now, here is the big part. So right here, I have a button that says, well, first of all, there's a button that says book a strategy call. So if you want to connect with me to go over your assessment and do a strategy call to see how we can work together to get your podcast to the place where it's ready to launch, you can click book a strategy call and we'll connect. You can set up a time with me. You can click on download PDF. And I'm going to click on that right here. And I'm going to open it. All right, so here is the PDF. All right, and you can actually download this. Now, because I'm 86%, the recommendations that it gave me is you're in great shape, focus on executing your plan and iterating based on listener feedback. All right, so this is the recommendation that it gave me based on how I answered the question. Now, you might want to go and check it out for yourself. Maybe you can go and answer all of the questions at the very worst, one of the multiple choice questions, and see the recommendations that it gives you. It gives you specific recommendations based on how you answered the questions in the questionnaire so that you know what to do to get a higher score on the readiness assessment. All right. And there's also a button here that says retake assessment if you need to. All right. So say, for example, if you got a poor score, maybe you got 35%, your readiness score, you can go down here and retake it after you make some recommendations or some changes to your podcast launch strategy. All right. So you can go ahead right now and take the assessment and be honest with yourself when you answer it. The goal is not to feel good about where you are. The goal is to get a clear-eyed view of what you have built so far and exactly what you need to do to take the next steps. Because here is the truth about podcasting. It rewards consistency, clarity, and commitment over perfection. You do not need the best microphone or the largest social following. You need a clear purpose and a plan that you will actually stick to and a strategy for letting the right people find you. This assessment helps you to see how you're doing in all three of those things. Now, if you have not taken it yet, the link is in the description of this episode. And if you've already taken it and you have questions about your results, you can reach out to me. You can book a strategy call with me. And I'd love to speak to you and hear about your podcast idea and how we can get it out there so that it can make an impact in the lives of the people that it's meant for. Now, as I always say to wrap up every single episode, I say the best time to start a podcast was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. So go ahead and make it happen. Take the podcast readiness assessment and see exactly where your podcast idea stands and what you need to do to get it out there to the millions of people that are waiting for your podcast. So go ahead and make it happen, and you'll hear from me again next week on I Made a Podcast. Peace.